Hi, my name is Melissa Urena, and this is my summary about my research paper. I did my research paper on ocean acidification and the effects it has on coral reefs. The reason I picked this is because I love the ocean. I'm afraid of swimming in the ocean, but I find the marine species really beautiful, and I think that we need to learn about what we're doing to the ocean. So that's why I picked this topic. We learned a little bit about it in class. We learned about ocean acidification and coral reefs, but of course my paper goes a little bit more in depth into this. So what I'm first going to explain is what is ocean acidification. After the Industrial Revolution, the carbon dioxide levels increased from 278 parts per million to 400 parts per million. And according to most of the articles I read, what this increase meant is that all of that CO2 that's going into the atmosphere is also going into the ocean. And from class, we learned that this happens because of the carbon cycle. Some of the factors that contribute to this increase of CO2 are things like car emissions, deforestation. Of course, after the Industrial Revolution, it was a lot of machines and factories and all of those things. So all of this carbon dioxide that they're letting out has to go somewhere, and it's going into the ocean. The ocean absorbs the CO2 that's in the atmosphere, and once it combines with water, it forms carbonic acid, which dissociates in hydrogen ions and bicarbonate ions. When there are more hydrogen ions than necessary, the water becomes acidic. The ocean has a pH level of 7.8, so that means it's pretty neutral. But once there's more CO2 in there, it's decreasing so that it's becoming acidic. The reason all of this ocean acidification is bad is because there are many marine species that make their skeletons out of calcium and carbon ions, and some of those are being lost because of ocean acidification. One of those marine species that makes their skeletons out of carbon and calcium ions is, of course, corals. Corals make their skeleton out of these, and scientists are worried that they're getting weaker and dissolved because if the ocean is becoming more acidic, there are less of those. Some of these corals are pretty old, and since they're becoming weaker, scientists have given them like 50 years. Some articles said that they only had about 50 years. Some said that they had like up to 250 years. But what they know is that they're gonna start dissolving. And so like scientists are worried because they use these corals, these skeletons, to find out more information about what the climate in the ocean was before. So yeah, that's why they're so worried about ocean acidification. But of course, like, corals aren't the only marine species that are being harmed by this. But that's for another topic. So then, of course, the corals aren't just the skeletons. The outside layer are tiny animals called polyps, like we learned in class. These polyps are described as the ones that gather the calcium and carbon ions from the water to solidify it and create the skeletal support. I found that these polyps have a symbiotic relationship with algae, especially with the zooxanthellae. Sorry, I can't say that word. From what we learned in class, what this relationship means is that they both benefit from the relationship. So the polyps give this algae a place to live, a home, a shelter, and what they give in return is they give them food. They get their food from photosynthesis. So what this means is that the corals have to be in a clear, shallow waters. This algae also provides corals with color because polyps are mostly transparent. And then I also found an article that said that the zooxanthellae, sorry, helps also improve the skeletal growth of the corals. But they said that they weren't sure how they do that. But so then that means that the ocean acidification is also affecting the algae that corals need to survive. So then I wrote a little bit about why any of this matters, not just to us, but for the marine species. So of course, like I said, the first ones that are going to be affected is the zooxanthellae, because they need them. They need the corals for shelter. And they're not the only marine species. Fish need them. I think I also said snails and many other marine species need corals. Because I found an article that said 25% of all marine species live in and around coral reefs. So they're providing shelter for a lot of animals. And of course, these animals do something for the corals as well. They keep them clean, they provide them with food, like many things. So they are necessary. So then the next thing I found is that they're not only necessary for these marine species, they're also like beneficial for us as well. Of course, the first thing they provide for us is economic benefits. So they're recreational activities, because we go snorkeling, we go into the ocean to take pictures of them, and like many other things that tourists do. So they generate a lot of money for communities that are close to the coast and like close to these coral reefs. So that's one benefit of them. The other one is that, of course, since they keep the fish alive, and some of these communities that are close by need those fish for food, so then it's like a little chain. Like if the corals are gone, then the fish are gonna be gone, then the people aren't gonna have food. Another thing I learned is that they protect coastlines from tropical storms. I didn't find a lot about this, but it's because they act like barriers, I guess. But the one that really surprised me, like one benefit that coral reefs have for us, is that I guess like there are new medical treatments that scientists are like doing with corals. They're using them to I don't know if it's to get rid of certain diseases or help with certain diseases, but it talked about new medical treatments for diseases like cancer, Alzheimer's, and many other ones that I thought was super surprising. And that just gives us another reason to why we should protect them or why we should care about them. So I learned that there isn't a lot we can do to actually protect them. It's not like we can go into the ocean and get rid of all the acidity or any of that. But I learned that there's a lot of organizations that are trying to create conservations and have marine protected areas. And what these people are doing is that they're educating the people that live close to the coral reefs, like communities that are close to the ocean and all of that. They're educating them on how to not overfish, how to reduce pollution that enters the ocean. They're doing a lot of that so that since they're so close to the ocean, they can start, they can do their little part on protecting them. Also when tourists come, so that they don't harm the corals, all of those little things. Even though we can't do something big to stop the CO2 that's going in there, there's like little things we can do. And of course, we can decrease the CO2 that's going into the ocean, not using your car as much, but yeah. The most important thing that most articles said was that what we have to do is get informed, read about corals, read about why they're important, of course, read about the ocean, stop using as many pollutants, and yeah. So overall, I think that most of us think that, oh well, corals, I don't need them, or this doesn't affect me. But the point isn't that we don't need the corals. The idea is that we are putting things into the ocean that are putting the species in the ocean in danger. Like most articles said, in 50 years, we might not have some of these corals anymore. So what does this mean? We might not have some of these marine species either. So I think the point is not that we don't need the corals or that like they don't matter or whatever. I think the point is that we are harming the ocean, like we're making it acidic. And like I learned in my book that I read for this class as well, like before there were so many animals, and then as soon as human came, like we got rid of a lot of them. So it's the same thing that's gonna happen to a lot of these corals, a lot of these marine species. Like we're getting rid of them because we're making the ocean acidic, or we're putting pollutants into the ocean. And I think that's what we need to worry about. And I'm really glad we did this research paper, and I'm glad I took this class because I took a lot out of it. Not just like learning like basic things like the soil and all of those things, but with this research paper I learned that the ocean becoming acidic is a big thing, and it's not what I thought it meant. I thought ocean acidification was something completely different, and I didn't think it meant this. I didn't think it meant that the pH level of the ocean was decreasing. I didn't think it was harming the species, but as I learned, it really is. And I don't know, I think I did learn a lot. So yeah, that's all I have. Well, thank you.